I know this is a very busy time of year, so we're very excited that you're joining us, and we have a really great panel for you this afternoon. My name is Katie Navin. I'm the director of the Colorado Alliance for Environmental Education, and today we're going to be talking about a topic that we're really excited about, and that's community weaving. And so just to dig into a little bit of that, or before we jump in, please type any questions you have in the chat box. We'll try to limit. You might want to press *6 or mute on your phone just to avoid any background noise if you're not speaking. But any questions you have, type them into the chat, and we'll try to respond to those as they come up, and hopefully we'll have some time at the end for questions as well. We are hoping to get this webinar recorded and be able to share it out to you as well, so that will be there as a resource. So I'm just going to jump in and talk a little bit about a conversation that we've been having about community weaving. And community weaving is a process that involves bringing environmental needs and community needs together. So when you think about environmental education, an image pops into your head, probably an image based on your own experience. And how we defined that was a process that helps us explore our environment, engage in critical thinking, and make informed decisions. But environmental education happens in so many different ways and different places and for different audiences that we really wanted to expand our thinking and think about how do we bring a community element stronger into environmental education, and what does that look like? So the image you see in front of you is really a collection of all those different, or not all, but some of the different ways that you might address environmental education, and it spans everything from through schools, zoos, museums, aquariums, parks, through hip-hop, through gardening, through food, through sustainability, through STEM, through agriculture. But there are millions of ways to look at environmental education, and we all come to this pathway differently. So we wanted to explore a little bit deeper what it meant to bridge some of the relevant issues in communities with environmental education. And so that brought us to this theme of community weaving, a new way to think about how we do environmental education, something that's bigger than partnerships, bigger than collaborations and networks, but it's really about finding alignment between environmental education and the missions of community groups, whether that be safety or health or spiritual needs, whatever that might be. How do you find a nexus between some of those things? So just like we were saying, there are a variety of different community weaves that you can, or community needs that you can think about. Food, health, safety, faith-based, arts and culture, financial needs, economic development that you can meld with environmental needs. So here's an example of an organization that's doing a great job at community weaving. So when you think of LiveWell, they're a health and well-being organization. So what are their goals that they share with their communities? It's things like food distribution, health and wellness, active living, community gatherings, youth activities, education, food production, and community building. These are all things that are important to the communities they serve, but also important to achieving health and wellness. So there's some nexus there. If you look towards the right side of the diagram, you'll notice coming out from goals like education and food production, there's several environmental education organizations that do share those goals and blend under that goal of health and wellness. Organizations like Greenleaf, Groundwork Denver, Mo Better Green Marketplace, Grow House, Justina Ford STEM Institute. And we're lucky today to have 3 of those organizations here with us to talk about how they blend this process of blending community needs and environmental needs. So just to back up a little bit and give a little background on this conversation started through a learning circle, and they really have been working over the past 2 years to pull this together. It includes members from all different types of organizations. And funding for this project came through the North American Association for Environmental Education to really explore this a little bit deeper. And so as a group, we decided to explore this a little bit deeper. We wanted to help get more information out about the process and the best practices. So we will have 3 webinars this summer, all focused around this idea of community weaving. The first one we're doing today is on best practices and what are those best practices for melding community and environmental needs. And then the second webinar, which will be at the end of July, will be on youth voice and blending that into programming. And the third will be on how do you know if you're creating community weaving partnerships, and how do you measure the success? How do you know if it's working? Looking at the process. So be sure to tune in for those. In order to get to best practices, we really felt like we needed to reach out to the EE community to talk about this a little bit more. So at our conference this year, we had a convening, brought folks together to explore this issue, or not an issue, but this idea in a little more depth and think about what makes it work. And so 4 practices really emerged out of this, and this is the practices are creating organizational value, and that's internally, thinking about how your organization values partnerships, seeking reciprocity, and how do you have balance in a relationship and make sure both entities in the partnership are benefiting from that, defining a shared vision. Where do your missions and your purpose overlap? How do you come together around an idea? And how do you build consensus? How do you make decisions together? How do you ensure that you're moving together throughout the whole process? So what we have here today is 3 incredible panelists to talk a little bit more about what that all means in practice, what it means to them, what it looks like when it works well. So to give you a brief introduction to each of the work that they do, I'm going to ask them each to describe their nexus with environmental education. So a little bit about your work and how environmental education is a part of it, because they all come at it from different ways. So I'm going to start with Beverly Grant, who is the founder of Mo Betta Green Mountain Marketplace, a farmer's market that is doing incredible work here in Denver. So Beverly, would you introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your nexus with environmental education?
I'd be happy to do that. I would say that beginning with the founding principles of the farmer's market, which are food literacy, environmental stewardship, and social responsibility, that was the framework upon which I began to build my community weaving process. Being a farmer's market and having those kind of principles definitely put me in a category by myself. And I evolved into having those focuses based on the community that I am serving. In trying to begin a farmer's market and reaching out to the community and just learning about what environment is like in the urban neighborhoods that I serve and live, you know, it was quite revealing to learn that all of these neighborhoods are food deserts, that all of those food deserts have more than the usual need and have fewer resources. And so in looking at that, that's what kind of propelled me to have those tenets of food literacy, environmental stewardship, social responsibility. Those things have led me full circle in realizing that environmental education is really a pinnacle that I needed to focus on in order to draw community together and teach around food and other things.
Great. Thanks, Beverly. With that, I'd like to introduce Deborah Farrard, who is the director of Justina Ford STEM Institute. And Deborah, I'd love to have you introduce yourself and talk a little bit about the nexus you see between your work and environmental education.
Okay, Katie, thank you very much. Listen, I want to thank CAEE for doing this. I think that learning better how we can come together and support the work of environmental education is critical, and that all hands, it's an all hands on deck piece in order for all of us to be successful. So the Dr. Justina Ford STEM Institute has a focus of advocating, educating and promoting STEM education for communities that are underrepresented. And specifically, I work with girls in North Denver, in particular girls of color, so Latino and African American girls, around STEM education, and STEM meaning science, technology, engineering, and math, and that is environmental education all day long. And so our work promotes and supports them being able to advocate on behalf of their own communities and learning about professions that they can go into long term to eventually come back and, give back. So that's what JS is about.
Great. Thanks, Deborah. That's awesome. And last, I'd like to introduce Dele Johnson with Groundwork Denver, also doing some incredible work. Dele, could you introduce yourself and talk a little bit about the work that you do and the nexus with environmental education?
Yeah, sure. So as Katie said, I'm Dele Johnson, and I work at a local nonprofit organization, Groundwork Denver. Our mission is community action with environmental results. So, down to the core of our organization, it's about bringing together community, nonprofit organizations, government agencies, and small business to collaborate to bring about environmental improvements in urban areas. And a lot of that it starts with education. People need to be educated on environmental issues, and we need to share information and knowledge about how to protect our environment, how to become stewards of it in order to further that mission and make sure that our collaborations and partnerships that we're creating throughout the community will be successful and that they can be sustainable.
Great. Thanks so much, Dele. So you can see the three panelists we have with us today are doing incredible work, and they all have in common that they're really engaged with the communities that they serve. So to jump back to our best practices of community weaving, our panelists are going to help us dig in a little bit and talk a little bit more about what these actually mean in practice and how they've seen them be successful. So we'll start with creating organizational value for partnerships. And while we talk about this and while our panelists talk about this, I would invite you to share additional thoughts and comments, other things that help make creating organizational value successful in the chat box, and we'll collect and collate everyone's comments. So think about that as we're talking. But Deborah, do you want to get us started in talking about what creating organizational value means and how you've seen it successfully done?
Absolutely. So when I think of organizational value, I think of a shared vision, and that goes back to what do we want to create. And when you think about your organization and what you want to create, if I were going to create a picture for everyone, it would be that everyone carries a visual about the company. They have a visual in their head about what the company does, and it's a heartfelt response. So there's a head and heart connection, to this shared vision. And so when I think of organizational value, that's what comes up for me. I think that for JF, our organizational value is to make sure that youth have a voice in what is happening in their environment and in their world, and that they have access to tools and learning that will support sustainability for themselves long term and then their communities specifically. So that's a shared vision. A shared vision is also that, in doing this work, that it does not belong to just one particular community, but that it is shared by everyone. Why? Because the environment belongs to us all, and so we all have a part in how, it's taken care of and how we are going to interact with that environment so that it is sustainable for everyone. So when I think of shared vision, that's what I think about, and to me, that is organizational value and partnership.
Great. Thanks so much, Deborah. Dele, what would you add to that? And do you have any examples of partnerships you're engaged in that really showcase that?
Yeah, I definitely do. So I think for us in creating organizational value is how we're able to leverage some of our resources. I think a prime example of that is our Green Team Youth Employment Program. So that's usually a way for us to bring a young and vibrant workforce to any certain type of project. For example, what we're doing right now is we're partnered with Denver Public Schools to farm land that they're not using at 2 of their school properties. And so underneath our urban farm director, our Green Team Youth are that main labor force that we're able to offer at a fair wage, but it's local youth that are given the opportunity to help produce local produce for free and reduced lunch program that a lot of these students are a part of, because a lot of them are youth from Denver and enrolled in Denver Public Schools. So it's our way of leveraging our resources to help bring value to the table. Denver Public Schools is able to offer us the space to farm, and then we're offering a local workforce. We're helping boost the local economy, giving these youth a chance to learn and giving them job opportunities.
Great example. Thanks, Dele. Beverly, what would you add to that? Any examples you would add to the conversation?
Certainly. In building around the farmers market, one thing, a practice I developed was matching missions with the needs that I may be working on, and if the mission of the organization that I'm reaching out to, their mission is focused around that need, then that began a fertile ground to begin a conversation. A very good case in point, Dele talked about the Groundwork Denver's Green Team. I have interfaced with them in different capacities. One, in direct service within the farmers market. They helped with food demoing, with some of the educational aspects. And then in more recent time, the Green Team has also helped with a farming project that I just started in the city to create a community farm. And again, those youth were a major part of that. Also looking at creating organizational value, when you ask someone to do something, and a lot of times if we find our ask in the realm of something extra, then people don't have a chance to get to that. That's why mission alignment is key, because if what you are asking falls within what is done naturally, then there's more synergy for a connection to happen. And then looking at what are the give and the get in the situation, meaning when you are asking something of an organization, what are you rendering back, to add value to what their mission is? And I have found that has created a strong regenerative ability for me to keep building my work year to year.
Great. Yes, Deborah, please jump in.
Okay, so you know what? I started talking about shared vision, and we were talking about organizational value, and I think, again, organizational value is what people spend their time doing and what they talk about. One of the pieces that I wanted to point out is both organizations, More Better Greens, Groundwork Denver. So, for example, my girls have had summer employment through Groundwork Denver, and they learn environmental, education through Groundwork Denver. In addition, Earth Force has been a critical partner with JF around water and water education. And then when you look at More Better Greens, food is everything. And Beverly has come to talk to our girls about the importance of food and permaculture. So, the organizational value as it relates to environmental education and weaving those connections, I think, are critical and important to strengthening the work for everybody. And also lightening that load. There's that African proverb that says, many hands make light work. And so when we all collaborate and come together with a shared vision, it just makes the work that much lighter in my mind.
I agree.
That's a great point, Deborah, and I think it also illustrates how interconnected each of these practices are. You can't really be successful unless you can't do one without the other, I think is very true. Another thing that really came up in some of the conversations we've been having around organizational value is around the organizational support for partnership. We all have so many things to do all the time. People are doing more work probably than they have ever done before in one job. You're not just doing one job, you're doing multiple. So when you commit to a partnership, what are the internal pieces that you put in place that give time and value to that? And making sure that it's not just one person in the organization who values that partnership, but that the organization is really interconnected so that it can be strong, and that the whole organization values that partnership so that you are able to put the time and energy into it that's needed to really make it flourish. Those were all amazing points about organizational value. And so we'll continue on. And again, these all kind of blend together. So you'll see some of the ideas coming up over and over again. But our second practice was really around seeking reciprocity and making sure that there's balance in between the give and the get, as Beverly put it, so that all the organizations who are participating in a partnership have multiple benefits to their organization, and there's not one organization that's giving more or benefiting more from the partnership, but that it really is supported among both. So this time, let's start with Dele. If you want to jump in and talk a little bit about what that means to you and things that you've done to foster that in partnerships that you've had.
Yeah, definitely. So with us, I think it's, each organization has to make sure that they're not being taken advantage of. Like when you're in that portion of creating your organizational value, maybe it's not about like overselling yourself or stretching yourself too thin, promising too much. You have to recognize that you want to show value for your partners, but you don't want them to take advantage of what you're bringing to the table, so that there is the mutual benefit there of both organizations being able to collaborate, and it's not like one is riding on the back of the other.
Great.
So
Thanks, Dele.
I'm going to jump in and add to that it's easy in doing this work to just jump right into the work because there's so much that needs to be done, right? And if you have hands that are willing to support what you're doing, you want those hands. But I think clarification up front is really key. And that looks like a sit-down conversation about, what are our individual missions, and then where is it that they intersect, and how can we support each other, and what does that support look like? And I think that brings about the reciprocity piece, so that you make sure that things are, on a level playing field as much as possible, right? So I need your support in this area. Our missions intersect, and in exchange, in addition to, on my side, this is something that I need. And I just think that has to be defined up front before, work is done, if at all possible.
Yes, I agree with that. And to add to what you're saying, Deborah, the issue of capacity is also got to be addressed at the front end, because one of the beautiful things about a collaborative situation is that a very giant entity can collaborate with a tiny entity, and both are adding value to each other. And in the instance of the smaller entities, certainly capacity is always more of an issue, and that's when sometimes leveling the playing field could look differently, in that the larger entity may have more that they can lend in support of the smaller.
Right. Yeah. I think a good example of that, Beverly, is the relationship that, JF has with Earth Force. I mean, Earth Force is a national organization. They certainly have more resources than, we do. And they have supported JF in a lot of different ways, in terms of space, in terms of training. In exchange, what we try to do is, show up to their events, bring the girls to their events so that they can engage in the workshop that they provide, and also lending a voice. I mean, we all know that in this work, a lot of times we are void of communities of color. And so being able to be a voice and bring a voice in that regard can be a tremendous help, because in this work we need all voices at the table, and all voices are not the same. So I agree wholeheartedly with Beverly that, smaller organizations partnering with larger organizations is certainly one way to do that. and defining how that can happen, having that clarity is really important.
That's
yeah,
a great.
absolutely.
Please jump in, Dele.
Oh yeah, I was just thinking of another example from us is our partnership with the EPA for our Lower Bear Creek program, where we're having our youth. We're able to offer up the labor and the time and the workforce to take water samples twice a week, use it locally in the neighborhood, and then we don't have the capacity to do the analysis of that, but EPA has that capacity, so that's where we're seeing the reciprocity there, is where we're able to collect the samples because we have the manpower and the time available, whereas they have the technical ability and the facilities to analyze the samples, so that there's a fair trade there because we both want to get to the bottom of the problem. We're both offering half of the solution.
That's another great example. Both great examples of really seeking reciprocity. And I think all three of you made a really good point that getting equal benefit from a partnership doesn't necessarily mean that you're giving the same thing to the partnership, that you're offering something different that the other partner needs. So I think that was a really great point. And thanks for bringing that into the conversation. Awesome. Our third practice is around defining a shared vision, and we've already talked some about this because it really is kind of a bedrock of any partnership, and it interweaves throughout all of the other practices that you can do in partnership building. I'd love to hear, let's have Beverly jump in first this time and talk a little bit about maybe an example of where you've seen organizations find a shared vision well, and that could be either something that lines up naturally or something where on first glance you might have not thought there was an alignment, but we're able to find one digging a little bit deeper.
Wow, okay. Well, certainly I want to start with dealing with the polar opposites because one thing I find, let's say in doing outreach work with people in a neighborhood, a lot of people have assumptions about what's the best way to go about doing that. And to be honest, you know, the plain old human approach of, you know, establishing a rapport, getting to know what's up. Now, when you're speaking, say, organizationally, that looks more like starting with, well, our mission is this and our mission is that. This is who we serve and where we serve. And then others also share that. But then when you get down to that granular level, because I think about the slide that you showed of Live Well, where they built a whole framework around healthy eating and active living. But then that spiraled into safety. It spiraled into school wellness. It spiraled into neighborhood parks and green spaces, because when you start getting to the people who are really the experts, they have the problems and the solutions with, you know, held in that same space, it helps you to see that when you're dealing with an organization, how to help them fulfill their mission to a grander and deeper level when people from the ground are allowed to share what's going on from that vantage point. Because we kind of forget that when we create missions and visions, a lot of times that they're well-intentioned and they're intentional. But if they are not inclusive of the people that you wish to serve, then there's going to be a little disconnect when you take that vision from paper and put it into practice. And so what I have seen over years and years of dealing with entities, of whether it's a nonprofit, a school, a church, it could be the library. The biggest missing thing are relationships. And this community weaving is all about building relationships, because sustainability lives within people. It takes people to move sustainability and reciprocity forward. And when we can get to that granular level and making that connection, it's amazing. And I've heard it kind of through the examples that Deborah shared and what Dele shared. You know, those are two very different facets, but when we get down to the bottom line, we're all serving people. And we've got to find that common strand that we all share. One thing I say is that we as individuals are a living system, and we don't think of ourselves as a living system, but we're a living system that lives in a living system, this planet. So when we start making those connections that we're a living system that lives inside of a living system, it starts changing our thinking in so many ways. And then this notion of environmental education, we realize that it's happening all the time, all around us, 24/7.
I love that, Beverly. That's great. Thank you. Deborah, what would you add to defining a shared vision or examples that you have seen where organizations did this really well?
Well, I think once again we've all shared good examples of shared vision, and just future tense. You know, I see more shared visions coming about. And I think it has to do with really clarifying what those organizational values are. Like what, it's not necessarily what you have on paper about your organizational values, but it's what you spend your time doing. That, to me, is the telltale sign. So whatever you spend your time doing, whether you realize it or not, those are your values. And that moves right into what is your vision going to be and how will you have a shared vision with others. So for JF, you know, we spend a lot of time developing young minds and youth voice. Our work primarily engages around youth. That shared vision, making sure that youth have a voice in what's happening in their environment, that they understand the importance of caring for their environment, that shares a vision with CAEE. It has a shared vision with More Better Greens. It has a shared vision with Groundwork Denver. It has a shared vision with Earth Force. You know, and it's just choosing what that strand will be, you know, and how we will choose to engage. So I think, I guess if I were going to say in a nutshell, for any organization that is doing this work, to really look at their organizational values, not from the perspective of what they have on paper, but what they do. What they do day in, day out. What are their conversations about? And who's included in those conversations, I think goes right into what those shared values and what those partnerships are going to look like.
That's great advice, Deborah. Great practice for us all to think about. Dele, what would you add to the shared vision conversation or any examples you know of where this has worked really well?
Well, I think that defining a shared vision, although we we haven't put these into a specific order as we've been going through them, but I think that defining a shared vision is one of the earlier steps to a collaboration or a partnership. I think that's what's really going to drive the following best practices, is being able to define that shared vision from an early point and knowing where the organizations are going to align, and then working from there to figure out organizational value and ways for reciprocity. I think that all is all going to derive from defining the shared vision. And I think that an example from us is what we're doing with Denver Public Schools. Both our organization and Denver Public Schools have defined a shared vision of wanting to increase access of healthy produce to students in Denver. And one of our missions as an organization is to promote health and well-being, address food justice issues, and make sure that local business and locally sourced produce is available to our youth.
Mm-hmm. Great. That's a great example, Dele. Thank you.
Dele, I don't want to put you on the spot, but there's more. I was thinking about another relationship that Groundwork Denver has around serving the needs of a community, and that's the collaboration that you have with ARIA, which is a developer, and Regis University that's happening over in North Denver.
Yeah, absolutely. That's right. In Northwest Denver, in that section, Northwest Denver, where the ARIA development is located, development that's happening, developers are building multi-family homes and mixed income living, and part of the conditions of that developer purchasing the land from a comment that was on the space previously was that it becomes a shared community, and that there was built-in access for local produce, locally grown produce, and so that's where we were able to come in. We had merged with another nonprofit organization, and we were able to offer this healthy produce through our greenhouse and through in-ground farming for that community specifically located in a food desert.
Another great example. That's awesome.
Yeah, and then to bring in Regis University, there's students from the university that are coming to help, and they're learning about farming economics, and they're learning about what it means to be a farmer, and then looking at collaborations between our nonprofit organization and a land developer, and so they're studying that collaboration and learning how to kind of streamline those things and helping us with our social enterprise format as well.
That's great, Dele. And we actually have a question on a chat specific to university community partnerships. Do you have any tips for how to strengthen those specifically in working with a university?
Well, for us, it's kind of been an organic process with what we've been doing with Regis in that respect, because the campus is right across the street from our site, and Candace, who is our urban farming director, already had a strong relationship with someone in the university. So I think it's just a matter of being able to build some relationships between the organization and the university, and going through these best practices of trying to define the shared vision and seeking the reciprocity and having being able to show value, each partner being able to bring something to the table. So with us, we were being able to offer like an off-site hands-on learning experience to the students, and then we're able to leverage the university in that we're getting ideas and an outside look from a student's point of view, and being able to hear what they're seeing and what they're experiencing, and having their input influence what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to add, go ahead, Deborah.
Well, and I think, well, first and foremost, the question said if you could give one tip for how to strengthen this type of partnership, what would it be? And so JF, we partner with Metro State, we partner with Regis University, and the Center for Urban Education, which is UNC Lowry. And each one of those partnerships has a different, a different component to it. They don't overlap. So once again, I'm going to say that the number one key thing for me is having the connection with the right department and the right person. The right person is key, and developing that relationship with the correct person, and then defining, once again, clarifying, how would this partnership move forward? What is it? What is the need? What is my need as an organization? What is your need as an organization? And then collaborating on how we can meet those needs based on being with the right person. Universities are huge, and you can find yourself in a lot of different arenas and engage in a lot of different political stuff if you don't, if you're not with the correct department or the right person and building relationships. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, I think that's a strong point, Deborah. Is you definitely do have to make sure that you connect with the right person first.
Yeah, and I would just dovetail that to say department is key to supporting community work, because I've been in numerous university community partnerships. Usually the university's role would be to provide technical assistance, research, sometimes staffing. But the common thread for the university department to be able to be engaged was there was either a class or a need for the curriculum to be supported somehow in the community. Something that the I don't want to call them youth because they're definitely older, but let's say the college students, something that they are studying, they needed to learn something in real time, so to speak. So that's how a lot of university community partnerships come into being. And just like we've been saying throughout most of the day, even with those partnerships, you have to be clear on what benefit the university is bringing, and then what benefit the university is receiving as a result of the community interaction. And that's so easy to build and create. And so the strongest way to begin that would be with whatever the mission or the need is that you're serving at in the moment. And it would even maybe tailor what university partners would be appropriate to reach out to. For example, in my experiences, I've interfaced with Naropa University, which is doesn't offer all the same things a traditional university does. Then I've had partnerships with University of Denver Law School, or but it was all driven by something that was needed in the moment.
That's great. We have about 5 minutes left in our webinar. So our last practice is building consensus. And this is really about the nuts and bolts of how do we work together. Once we have a shared vision, how do we make decisions? How do we move forward? How do we do it? So since we only have a few minutes, I'm going to ask each of you to share just one quick top tip for what you think makes this part successful. How can you move forward together in a partnership? Deborah, do you want to get us started?
So when you talk about consensus and just defining that, it's supporting a decision in the best interest of the whole, right? I think a consensus model is very important when you're working with different sized organizations, be it large ones, small ones, and then understanding the value that each entity brings to the table, because we all bring value. No matter how big you are or small you are, we each have value, and I'm going to say that value is probably equal. In more than likely it's equal. And so consensus means to me that there's no big I and little you. And approaching decision making in that manner, and understanding that even though it may not be favored, the decision may not be favored by each individual, we build around solidarity, right? Because it's best for the whole. It takes a lot of work to do it, but I believe it's worth the time to use that as a model to come up with decisions.
Great. Dele, what would you add to that?
I think that, just when our bullet points here are to actively listen, decide when to compromise, to be proactively inclusive, and continuing to realign. I think that final point, continuing to realign, is a very important piece. That as you progress through a partnership, roles may change, capacities may change, goals and missions may change, and so I think that continually realigning to make sure that you're always back to that same page, whether that same page is a new page than the one you started on. I just think that's going to be one of the keys to staying successful, is that you make sure that you're realigning periodically so that you're still working towards your goals or achieving your past goals and then moving on to your new goals.
Awesome. Absolutely. Beverly, what would you add?
Well, honestly, not too much. I would say that working from a consensus model is best when you're dealing with a collaborative entity, because we all have kind of different, let's say, policies and procedures internally, but when you're working in consensus, all of that can be blended together in a harmonious way. I want to divert back to that example of Live Well. All of us assembled together today work in that collaborative in some capacity, and we utilize that consensus model as our decision making way of either approving or disapproving something that's going to happen.
Awesome. Thanks, Beverly. So we just have one more minute to wrap up today, and we want to get you on your way right at 2. But you can see that all of these practices and principles, none of them are rocket science. They're all things that we know and do already, but they're hard when you actually put them into practice to really think collectively. So the more we talk about it and the more we hear about successful examples, the better at some of these practices we can become. Collaboration and partnership is extraordinarily valuable. It makes a huge impact, but it does take work and constant practice. So I hope the examples that the panelists shared were helpful today, and I want to thank them all for their insight and their expertise, particularly in bringing communities together. They're all doing incredible, amazing work. Like I said, we will be trying to share this webinar out so you have it as a resource. And then we'll have 2 upcoming webinars, one on youth voice on July 28th at 1 p.m., and then one in August on how do we measure the success of these partnerships. So I hope you'll join us again, and I hope this is helpful to the work you're doing with communities and new audiences. Thank you again so much for joining us today, and have a great rest of your day.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.